Hi, my name's Mike Rash. Today we're going to be doing a pre-trip inspection on a Class A vehicle without air brakes. We're going to start with the exterior of the vehicle. Everything on the exterior of the vehicle we're going to point to and verbally say what we inspect each item for. We're going to start with Form A, which will be the front of the vehicle, the engine compartment, the steering components, and the front driver's side axle. Then we'll do Form B, which will be from the driver door to the rear of the vehicle. These items will include the underside of the vehicle and our one rear driver's side axle. Then we'll do Form C, which is going to be our trailer. We have to inspect one axle of a trailer, and we do have to inspect the rear of the trailer and the underside of the trailer. We'll inspect our coupling system, which everybody will have to inspect for the Class A pre-trip inspection. And everybody will have to do the in-cab inspection. When we do the in-cab inspection, we have to demonstrate everything inside the cab. We'll go on and do Form A. We'll start at the front of the vehicle. Form A, which is going to be the front of the vehicle, the engine compartment, steering components, and the front driver's side axle. First, we're going to look at the front of our vehicle. We're going to check our lights. Make sure our headlights are clean, clear, securely mounted, not cracked. Also going to check our amber indicator lights. Of course, they should be amber, clean, not cracked, securely mounted, and our clearance lights on the top of our vehicle. Again, amber in color, clean, not cracked, securely mounted. I'll check underneath my vehicle for any engine leaks, any fluid that's dripping from my engine. No leaks on my engine. We'll go to the engine compartment. I'd like to check all my hoses, make sure that they're not swollen, kinked, rubbing, all my clamps are tight, none of my hoses are leaking. Check my engine for leaks, make sure that there's no leaks on my engine. From there I go to my fluids. First thing I'd like to check is my engine oil, make sure it's between add and full. Check my coolant level, make sure it's between add and full, and my power steering fluid, make sure it's between add and full. I'll talk about my power steering pump. It should work properly, securely mounted, not leaking. Have to say it's belt driven. The belt should have 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch of tension on the belt. The belt's not ripped or torn. I'd come over and check my water pump. My water pump should be securely mounted, not leaking. Belt driven. Belt should have 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch of tension on the belt. Belt's not split or cut. Check my alternator. My alternator should be securely mounted. Wires should be secured, they're not frayed, they're plugged in all the way. Alternator's belt driven, 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch of tension on the belt, not split or cut. Then I go over and check my master cylinder and check the fluid in it, make sure it's between add and full. My master cylinder securely mounted, master cylinder's not leaking. My lines are securely mounted, not leaking. That will complete our engine compartment. We'll go on and inspect our steering components. After we complete our engine compartment, we'll inspect our steering components. Now I'll inspect my steering box. It should be securely mounted, should not be leaking. My hoses that go into my steering box should not be leaking. They should be securely mounted. They should not be kinked or swollen. I would inspect my steering linkage. My nuts should be tight. My sockets should not be worn. My bushings should not be missing or torn. My steering linkage should not be bent or broke. I would inspect it from axle to axle. After I complete my steering components, I would go on and inspect my axle. First thing I like to inspect on my axle are my suspension parts. I would inspect my spring mount, my front one. It's not cracked, it's not broken, my bolts are tight, it's not rusted, my bushings are not missing or torn. Have to inspect my front one. Also have to inspect my rear spring mount the same way. Have to inspect both of them to get credit for it on the test. I would inspect my leaf springs. They're in alignment, they're not rusted, they're not cracked. We would go on and inspect our U-bolts. They should not be shifted, they should not be cracked. My nuts should be tight. And my shock absorber. My nuts should be tight, should be securely mounted. My shock absorber should be straight and not leaking. After we complete our suspension parts, we'll go on and inspect our brake parts, which is my brake line. It should not be leaking. My fittings should be secure. My line is not kinked or swollen. From there we'll go to the outer part of our wheel and inspect our rotor. Our rotor should be smooth, not cracked, securely mounted, no grease or oil. And our brake pads should be sufficient for 1/4 inch, no grease or oil on our brake pads. From our brake parts we'll go to our wheel parts. Which is our tire. Our tread should be evenly worn, no nails. Tread depth should be minimum of 4/32 of an inch. Our sidewalls don't have any splits or cuts or bubbles. I would check my valve stem, make sure that it's straight, not leaking, has a cap. Check my tire pressure with a gauge. From there we'll go to the rim. No cracks in the rim, no aftermarket welds, it's not rusted, has a good bead to the tire. Then we'll check our lug nuts, make sure none are missing, they're all tight. There's no rust trails that might indicate that they're loose. Then we'll check our axle seal, make sure our bolts are tight, no leaks on the axle seal. That will conclude Form A. We're going to do Form B of this vehicle. Form B will be from the driver door to the rear of the vehicle. It'll include the underside of the vehicle, our rear driver side axle, If there's anything unique on the other side of the vehicle, we will need to inspect that. We'll start with our door. Our door has no holes in it. Our door should open and close. Our seal should be whole, not missing, and our hinges should be secure, not bent or broke. We'll check our mirror. Mirror bracket should be securely mounted. Bracket should not be bent or broke. Our mirror should be clean, not cracked or broken. We'll check our step. Step should be securely mounted. It's not broken. Pad is not loose. No grease or oil or debris on our step. Underneath the vehicle, we'll inspect our drive shaft. Start with the U-joint. Bolt should be tight. No debris in my U-joint. My drive shaft itself is straight, not cracked or broken. I would check my frame. Make sure my frame is straight. Bolts are tight. Not cracked. No aftermarket holes on my frame. Any cross members that I have should be bolted in place or welded in place. Cross member should be straight. I check my fuel tank. I would check my straps holding my fuel tank. They should be whole, securely mounted. Fuel tank itself should not be leaking. It's not dented. Straps should have a rubber gasket on them so it doesn't rub metal to metal. I would check my fuel tank line where it goes in from my cap to my tank. Make sure it's not rubbing or leaking. I would check that all the way to my fuel cap. My cap should be secure, not leaking, and have a seal on the inside. From underneath the vehicle, we'll go on and inspect the rear axle. First, we'll inspect our suspension parts. We have our front spring mount. Should be securely mounted, whole, bolts are tight, not cracked. And then we'll inspect our leaf springs. Leaf springs should be in alignment, not rusted, not cracked or broken. We'll inspect our U-bolts. They should not be shifted, not be broken. They should be securely mounted. We'll inspect our shock absorber. It should be securely mounted, straight, not leaking. And we also have to inspect our rear spring mount, the same as we do our front spring mount. Securely mounted, not cracked or broken. Any bushings that we have should not be worn or missing. From there, we'll go to our brake parts. Our brake parts are: the brake line should not be kinked or swollen. Fitting should be secure. It's not leaking. Our brake drum should be smooth, no holes, securely mounted, no grease or oil. And our brake pads should be sufficient, at least 1/4 inch, no grease or oil on our brake pads. From our brake parts, we'll inspect our wheels. We'll inspect our bud spacing. Should be no debris in between our tires. Our rims should be flush together. We'll inspect our tires. Should be evenly worn, no nails, minimum of 2 30-second tread depth. Our sidewalls should have no splits or cuts or bubbles on them. Our valve stem should be straight, not leaking, with a cap. We would check our tire pressure with a gauge. We'll check our rim. No cracks on the rim, no aftermarket welds, should not be rusted, should have a good bead to the tire. Our lug nuts should be tight, none missing. no rust trails that would indicate a loose lug nut. Axle seal, all bolts are tight, not leaking. We'll go on and inspect our rear of our vehicle. We do have a light on the rear of our vehicle, a clearance light. Should be red in color, clean, not cracked, securely mounted. Our mud flap should be securely mounted, not ripped or torn, should be sufficient in length. Our lights on the rear of our vehicle should be red in color, clean, not cracked, securely mounted. We do need to inspect what's unique on the passenger side of the vehicle, which is our exhaust. Need to inspect our exhaust from our tailpipe. Follow it underneath the vehicle. Make sure there's no signs of soot where it would indicate a leak. We would check any bracing, that it's not bent or broke, bolts are tight. Make sure my clamps where it goes from pipe to pipe are secure. We're going to check that all the way to the motor, and we'll inspect the exhaust all the way to our turbo. Make sure there's no soot, make sure my clamps are tight, make sure my exhaust is secure. That would conclude Form B of the vehicle inspection. We're going to go on to Form C. Form C is the trailer. We're going to start from the tongue of our trailer. We're going to check our landing gear, make sure it's welded in place. If you have bolts, you have to check your bolts. Any bracing that you have, you check to make sure it's straight, not bent or broke. Bolts are welded in place. I would check the landing gear pad, make sure it's whole, not cracked. My landing gear should be up all the way. My handle operating my landing gear should be secure. We'll go on and inspect our trailer. Any lights that we come to, need to inspect our lights. They should be amber in color. This one's on the front. Should be clean, not cracked, securely mounted. I check my trailer frame. Trailer frame should be straight. No aftermarket welds, no holes, no aftermarket holes in my trailer. Cross members should be straight, welded in place or bolted in place. They should be straight, and no holes in my trailer floor. We'll go on and inspect our axle on our trailer. We're going to inspect our rear axle on this trailer. We'll start with our suspension parts. We have our rear spring mount welded in place. It's not cracked or broken. Bolts tight. Any bushing that we have should not be missing or torn. Our front spring mount, check it for the same thing. No cracks. The bolt should be tight. Any bushing that you have should be whole, not missing. Our springs themselves should be in alignment. Should not be cracked or rusted. My U-bolts should be tight, securely mounted. They're not shifted or cracked. From my suspension parts, I'll go on to my brakes. I got electric brakes. My wires aren't split or cut. I'd inspect my brake drum. Brake drum should have no grease or oil. Bolts are tight. It's not broken. This has a cover on it, but I would say I inspect my brake pads. Should be sufficient, at least a 1/4 inch. No grease or oil on my brake pads. For my brake parts, I'll go and inspect my wheel. I'd inspect my tire sidewalls. Have no splits or cuts or bubbles. My tread should be minimum of 2/32 of an inch. Should be evenly worn, smooth. No nails on my face of my tire. Inspect my valve stem. Should not be leaking straight with a cap. I would check my tire pressure with a gauge. I'd inspect my rim. No cracks on my rim. No aftermarket welds. It's not rusted. Has a good bead to the tire. Inspect my lug nuts. None missing. All tight. No rust trails. Indicate they might be loose. And I would check my axle seal. Make sure it's not leaking. From our axle, we go on and inspect our rear clearance light. It should be red in color, clean, not cracked, securely mounted. We'll go on and inspect the rear of our vehicle. Our lights should be red in color. Lenses should not be cracked, should be clean, securely mounted. This vehicle we have ramps, but if we had a door, we would inspect our door. We'll inspect our door, make sure that it opens and closes. Our seal is not ripped or torn or missing. We'll check our hinges, make sure they're secure, they're not bent or broke. We'll check our lights. They should be red in color, securely mounted, clean, not broken. All the lights on the rear of our vehicle. We'll check our reflective tape. It should not be peeling, it should be clean. Check our reflectors. They should be securely mounted, red in color, clean, not cracked. Once we complete the rear of our trailer, that will conclude Form C. We'll inspect our coupling system. We have a pintle hitch device here. First, we're going to inspect our welds, make sure we have no broken welds. Our pintle is held in. Make sure that it has a cotter key on it. It's not bent or broke. Our pintle itself is straight. No broken welds in that. Our hitch release lever, bolts are tight. It's not worn thin. Our locking device is locked in place. Our pintle hitch tongue is whole. It's not cracked. It's not worn thin. Bolts are in place. It's welded securely to our trailer tongue. It's not bent or broke. We would check our safety devices. We have chains. They're welded in place. The links aren't cracked or broken. My chains need to be crisscrossed where they hook to the truck, whether they're D-rings, but they should not be bent or broke. They're welded in place. I would check my electrical plug. My prongs should be straight, no debris in my prongs. My electrical plug should be plugged in all the way. My electrical line itself shouldn't be split or cut, should not be mended. We have to check the connection to our electrical plug, which is hardwired to our trailer tongue. It's secure, all my bolts are tight. That would conclude the coupling system. For the Class A vehicle, along with the coupling system, everybody has to do the in-cab inspection and engine start. First, I'd like to inspect the safety items of the in-cab inspection, which is my seat belt. Make sure it's securely mounted at the top and the bottom on the floor. Make sure that it latches properly, and make sure the belt isn't split or cut or has frays in it. I'd like to check my safety equipment. Need to carry 3 red reflective triangles, fully charged mounted fire extinguisher, and spare fuses. After the safety equipment, we'll do an engine start. Make sure my vehicle's in park. First thing I want to check is that my ABS light comes on and goes off. If I had DEF, I'd make sure my DEF light went on and off. That would indicate that I have ample DEF fluid, which is at least 1/8 of a tank. I would check my oil pressure gauge, make sure that the needle rises, operates in a safe range. Check my water temperature gauge, make sure that the needle rises when my engine warms up and it operates in a safe range. And check my voltmeter, make sure that the needle rises, operates in a safe range. I'll check my lighting indicators, make sure my left arrow blinks, My right arrow blinks. My four-ways blink. And my high beam indicator light also works. I would check my windshield wipers, make sure that they operate, that the blades aren't split or cut, and the metal arms aren't bent or broke. I would also check my water, make sure that the water works and sprays on my windshield. I would check my horn, make sure my horn works. I would check my heater and defroster, make sure my heater blows, make sure my defroster blows. I would check my windshield, make sure there's no cracks in my windshield, there's no stickers, it's clean. I would check my mirrors, make sure my mirrors are in adjustment and they're clean. I would go on and check my brake parts. I would check my parking brake. I would apply my parking brake, put my vehicle in gear, lightly try to accelerate, feeling my truck parking brakes working properly. I would check my trailer parking brake by applying my trailer parking brake and lightly tapping the gas, making sure my trailer brakes are working properly. I would check my service brake. I would leave it in gear. I will pull forward approximately 5 miles an hour. Hit my foot brake or my service brake. Make sure when I stop I have a good pedal and my wheel didn't pull left or right. I would also do a hydraulic brake check, which is pass-fail on the test. I would pump my brake pedal 3 times, hold it for a minimum of 5 seconds to make sure my brake pedal does not leak down. The hydraulic brake check is a pass-fail item on the test. You have to do that exactly correct or else it is automatic fail. That will conclude my in-cab inspection, and that would conclude our visual inspection on a Class A vehicle without air brakes. Thank you very much.